Welcome to the Copilot Show, where I interview Microsoft staff innovating with AI. I hope you will find this podcast educational and inspire you to do more with this great technology. Now, let's get on with the show. In this episode, we're going to be focusing on everything managed environments by the guru himself. Today's guest is from Seattle, Washington in the United States. He works as at Microsoft as a partner director of product management. You can find links to his bio, social media, etc. in the show notes for this episode. Welcome back, Ryan.
Hey, Mark. Thanks so much for having me, man. Great to be here.
Good to have you on. The last time you were on was in August 2023, so not too long ago. You had just taken on this new role, so you didn't even know what managed environments meant at that point. But then previous to that, you and I had a discussion in 2019 around the Common Data Service. So therefore, it was before that was even renamed to Dataverse that we have today. That's when you used to run that whole part of the show.
Yeah. It's been wild to see, the growth of managed environments over the last year and, how far we've come in terms of governance and security of the platform. Also, how far our customers have come in their maturity of how they roll out low code to their enterprises. And it's wild to think back to those Dataverse days when we were the common data service, or sometimes I jokingly called it the uncommon data service, as we were bringing together those worlds of XRM and CDS 1.0 and everything else together. I'm sure your listeners remember those dark ages.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. Before we jump into the meat and potatoes of this podcast, tell us a bit about what's going on outside of Microsoft for you these days. What are you into? What got you interested when you're not at the office, so to speak?
Oh, gosh. Well, it's summer here, right? And so Washington, we have great weather this time of year. And so I spend a lot of time with my family out. We have a little beach cabin in Ocean Shores. And so I enjoy, taking many calls just like this one, or many discussions just like this one with the Pacific Ocean just a few feet behind my camera. So that's what's top of mind for me. And, a little bit closer to work, but not too much work related. We have what we're calling the Scale Summit this week, where we're bringing together all of our engineering leaders and product leaders across the Power at Scale organization here in Redmond. And they're all coming over to my house for dinner tomorrow night. So I'm prepping. Wow. In fact, I was baking shortcakes earlier, right before I ran on and hopped on the call. We have 46 people that are going to be having dinner at the house tomorrow night. So it's pretty exciting.
That's awesome. I didn't realize your place was so close to the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah, the Ocean Shores place is. Now, when I'm working in Seattle, of course, I'm about 2.5 hours.
Yes, that makes sense. That makes sense because if you wave out your window, right, I'm directly opposite you on the other side of the Pacific Ocean. I look out my window to the Pacific Ocean, it's just at the bottom of the world.
That's awesome. So maybe I just need to build a really good paper airplane with the girls.
Exactly. See how much lift you can get on it. It'll go around the curvature of the earth and bang, I'll pick it up. And then I'll throw you one back. That's why we'll converse from now on. Modern technology. Tell me, that's going to be full on with having all those guests over at your place. I don't envy you that. I don't know that I like large crowds in my home, but well done. Tell me, what's on your radar at the moment? You've been in managed environment land now for probably 9 months odd. I feel my perception in market, people still don't really fully understand where managed environments apply. And, my experience in biz apps for the last 20 odd years, it takes about 3 years for people to catch on, right? Everyone's still in the COE starter kit kind of phase. We're doing heaps with that. What is this managed environment? Is it prime time yet? That type of thing. But what's on your radar? What's the big things motivating you in 2024 around managed environments, the Power Platform, and life at Microsoft?
Yeah, of course, I live and breathe, managed environments usage. It's on a rocket ship. It's grown over 20 times in terms of usage since I joined the team, about a year ago. So that's going really well. We're focused a lot on what we call app scale, which is how do we help, customers build true tier one enterprise scale applications on the Power Platform, and what are the tools that they need to be able to do that. And of course, Copilot changes everything. It wouldn't be a podcast with a person at Microsoft right now if I didn't say Copilot at least, 11
Correct.
billion times through the course of our
Hmm.
discussion. So yeah, I'd say, it's all about managed environments, admin scale, app scale, and AI scale. In fact, that's how my team is structured these days. Focused all on how do we help people build big, bad apps, bad being good, of course, how do we help them
Yes,
manage all
yes.
that stuff? And then how do we see to it that all those apps are intelligent?
I like it. My passion project in 2024 has been around educating the market on enterprise apps, or, Steve Modu can coin the term anchor apps. These are apps that are so important to an organization, you're not pulling them out in a hurry, right? They're mission critical. And I've just done 2 podcasts with around these. One was a major solution that runs the entire passport system for New Zealand. So only 600 users internally, but around 5 million external people going through the portal into that environment, running the full life cycle of passports, and then also all visas going in and out of New Zealand. So that's a big app, right? I've had another conversation with a company that has 9,000 active users daily on theirs. They've got 6,000 offices across the world. It runs their entire center management, everything for they do a shared office space under multiple brands. Anybody doing startups, an address, all that kind of stuff. So all over the world, well established. As I say, 9,000 active users a day using it. That's a big app. I've got one coming up with the rail networks of the United Kingdom that run all the physical rail infrastructure of the entire United Kingdom. And I was surprised to hear that they even invented the concept of railway some 200 something years ago in their company, right? So once again, apps at scale. And the reason it's a passion project for me is I feel that a lot of people have heard about Citizen Developer and anybody can build apps on this platform. And there's not been enough voice around what big companies are doing at enterprise scale. What are you seeing?
Yeah, so I think we are seeing the platform really starting to hit its stride when it comes to how customers can build these enterprise apps, right? Because if we remember, the Power Platform, it's what sits beneath our Dynamics applications. And so, we've had Dynamics applications running call centers with tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of monthly users for a long time, right? However,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
because Microsoft's using it to build those high scale apps. It's very different for us to provide the tools that are necessary for anybody to be able to build apps that can operate at that scale. And so there have been, a number of things that we've been doing to really help and accrue to that vision. The first thing is, of course, we've been doing a lot of investment, making a lot of investments into how the apps are just super, super reliable and also how they're faster than ever. Our hope is that, as you go through and you make small updates to your apps, you save and republish them every time, they just get a little bit quicker without you needing to do
Mm.
anything else. And so a ton of investment going in there. In fact, there's a recent investment that we made that took a customer's app that used to take 51 seconds to load. Not really fast, not great, right?
Wow, yeah.
And after this change, it took like 2.4 seconds to load. I mean, just
Wow,
drastic
amazing.
changes. So a lot of investment going on. I mean, the first time that we talked, Mark, we talked about our 5 things, I think: availability, performance,
Yeah.
yeah,
I,
supportability, security, and efficiency. I can't shake my 5 things, man. They always stick with me no matter what. The next set of things that we've been doing is we've been investing a lot in the tools that are needed for people to be able to build these apps. And, if you have an app that 9,000 people a day are logging into for, like you said, running rail networks or those sorts of
mm,
things,
mm, mm, mm.
change management, really, really important, right? Ensuring that nobody has standing access to production, super, super important, right? And so
Yeah.
we've been investing an awful lot into how our tools like pipelines and our integrations with the rest of the DevOps ecosystem can really help people, have those great CI and CD processes to help them move those apps reliably between dev test and production environments. And then, I think the final place, and, I think we'll have some cool stuff to talk about here later this year, we're investing very heavily in the tools that are needed to operate those apps. Because a lot of times in Power Apps, we're all makers, we PMs, we love building stuff. We don't always think as much about what does it mean to run that app on day 100 or day 1000. And so we're making a lot more investments into not only how do you build the initial app, but how do you operate that app along. And so I'm pretty excited about that because think about the typical enterprise app portfolio. Most of it is composed of apps that are, their age is measured in years, not in months, right?
Yeah,
And a
yeah,
lot of power
exactly.
apps today are built around, those life cycles of months to a couple years, but, aren't too many 10-year-old power apps out there, I guess, other than D365 sales and service.
Yeah. And so that's the interesting thing, right? And I'm glad you brought up those 5 themes because when you had started talking, I was like, man, I remember those 5 themes so clearly when you first came into the team. And that was a focus for you and it created so much change. So it was good you tied back to that. If you want to listen to it, that's back in that Common Data Service podcast. We discussed that. The thing is that you mentioned Dynamics 365 sales there. And for years in my career, because I came from that side of the house, we built mega implementations that use that SKU today if you mapped it forward, right? So there was a project I did in WA, Western Australia, Main Roads, did all their roading infrastructure. And you're like, well, that's 11 times the size of the entire United Kingdom. 11 times. That's the geography that they were covering, right? And it did asset management. It had offline capability. We used the old Outlook com object to do it. It was on toughened devices in road workers' trucks. It had ArcGIS integrated. It was, and guess what? It's still used today. And we're talking 10 years on, still used today because it did its job and it was better than the Oracle solution they could buy off the shelf at the time. In Australia, did one that did all the border force across all international ports in Australia. And it was, once again, D365, what we'd call sales now is the SKU behind it. But it does still the inception for legal trail of all goods coming in via air and sea cargo into Australia, right? It's still running today. It's an enterprise app. They can't pull it out tomorrow because the impact it would have on the business. And it's those stories. Do you have any like that you're seeing in the managed environment space that are, and you can't reveal the names of the organizations, but just maybe some, like, what are they doing that they have chosen the Power Platform for those enterprise workloads?
Yeah, I think we've seen a few trends across a few industries, one being financial services. A surprisingly large number of the GSIFIs, globally significant financial institutions, use Power Platform for running many of their business processes, whether those are personnel functions, whether those are tracking, various compliance obligations and workflows. We're seeing some pretty tremendous adoption in the financial services space. And these are cases where in these, regulated companies, you're talking about every employee needing to use those applications and use them regularly. We're also seeing continued strong adoption within the energy sector as well. And we see, in many cases, the tools being used. I know sometimes, digital transformation is like a buzzword, but man, the amount of paper and the number of Excel sheets that are out there and ripe for disruption, that market opportunity is immense. And we see a lot of activity going on there.
Let's take a quick break.
Are you ready to transform your career in just 90 days? Join me on the 90-Day Mentoring Challenge and unlock your full potential. As I listen to the podcast, enroll now and get 10% off using the code MBAP. That's MBAP at the checkout. Don't miss this opportunity to learn from industry leaders and accelerate your growth. Visit ako.nz365guy.com and start your journey today. Tell me about security. I've seen some new things around IP security that you've built in from a managed environments perspective. And I know that for those financial institutions, for example, the security is always a big part of the conversation. In fact, I have found in pretty much any enterprise discussion, risk is the biggest thing that's discussed once the platform has proved its chops. What are you thinking about in that area?
Yes, we've been investing super, super heavily in how we provide additional security controls within the Power Platform. And in many cases, thinking about how we align or adapt those security controls to, the various mental models that security professionals already use and leverage. Whether that's something like the
Mm-hmm.
OAuth top 10, whether that is, if you remember from your SysIP days, the good old layered security model, looking at how
Yeah.
those models are designed and how they are understood and seeing to it that our products support those things, whether that is in how we provide customer managed key support using customer key vaults and HSMs, or whether that's how we provide virtual network connectivity so that, network security professionals can continue to manage the network perimeter like they traditionally have. A lot of investments really going into, once again, allowing our customers to secure their low code estate on their terms and using, the concepts, the mental models that are well established within mature security practices. Now, I think the other thing that's really interesting about that is it's one thing to have, environments that are secured when you're talking about projects that are being driven primarily out of central IT. I think the other thing that's interesting to think about is what does it mean to see to it that every environment, for everyone that's practicing or participating in development across the organization, is on an equally secure and compliant footing. And so I think that's where, those primitives that we've been building and how those things tie into environment groups and environment rules, the way that you're able to do policy-based configuration of security items across the low code estate. I think that's where things get really, really interesting because sometimes we think governance as one function, we think about security as another function. And in
Mm-hmm.
reality, they're actually quite related as we think about, the center of empowerment as opposed to just the center of excellence.
Yeah. Have you been working on the default environment?
Oh man, the default environment. Yes, we have. One of the capabilities that we released been several months ago now that it became generally available is environment routing. And
Mm-hmm.
the whole idea behind this is as makers come to create things within, the Power Apps Maker Studio and they show up there for the very first time, we go through and we'll provision for them their own personal environment. Will stamp on that environment the rules and the policies that are defined by IT to make sure they're well governed and that they're super secure by default. And the power of doing this is if you think about the environment that's needed for someone's personal use or someone's development use, those policies can be much more constrained than the policies that can be applied to something like default that has hundreds, thousands, in some of our customers' cases, hundreds of thousands of applications. And so these little environments allow folks to maintain much tighter control, much stronger governance over what can be built. And so increasingly, we're seeing that new assets are being created within developer environments or being created within personal environments rather than being created within the default environment. I have a dream that one day we'll get to a place where very few assets get created. Maybe I should say no assets get created in the
Yeah.
default environment. It's going to be a little while till we get there, but I think that that's going to completely change the way that IT and the industry looks at how the Power Platform can be used to empower anyone to improve the lives of their businesses and customers.
Yeah, very good. Do you do much in the space of licensing in regards to managed environments?
Probably. I mean, licensing, it's my favorite topic.
So one of the pushbacks, I was in Slovenia earlier this year presenting on Centre for Enablement and why premium is important. In fact, I've just done a presentation that I'll be doing at the Vegas conference on the fallacy of free. And as I went through, and of course, this is why basic licensing is not necessarily better than and premium. And as I built out the case for it, I fell in love all over again with Dataverse because you just realize you get so much out of the box with Dataverse. And of course, that is a premium license. And then, I go back to risk and why enterprises buy out of mitigating risk. And of course, I tell quite a story in that around SharePoint and the number of connectors that you create and the risk of PII as well as PI information being spread over a heap of different lists. And in the age of Copilot, how that can all be brought together to be a meaningful piece of information, and that should raise concerns. Anyhow, I got a pushback on the managed environments from the people using Power Automate desktop folks, and where that use case fitted into the scenario of them, because Power Automate desktop is free as part of Windows 11, and how that fitted in the managed environment story. How would you kind of discuss that?
Yeah, I think I have a couple of thoughts there. The first thing I'd say is when we think about how we take and provide many of these tools for people to start making, right? We never want to monetize making. We want people to be able to start making. We want people's, creativity and potential to be unleashed through that making. Now, the flip side of this is, of course, many organizations want to have control over how people can be creative. They want to be unleashed, but maybe, maintain a bit of a leash on, right? The thing is, when you start looking at that group of people, that's IT, right? These are highly compensated individuals. These are formally trained individuals in many cases. And these are folks who value very highly these tools to be able to control what people can do, automate how people do these things. And so the thing is, we kind of look at like back in the day, right? You had Windows and System Center, where yes, you had the OS, but you did pay to manage it. Right? Look competitively.
Yes.
Remember the hypervisor wars? And maybe I'm dating myself by even referring to that.
But I do remember
but
them,
you had Hyper-V that we would give away. And then, of course, VMware gave away, their hypervisor. But if you wanted the management tools, for us, you had System Center. For VMware, you had, was it vSphere or what have you? And so I think there's quite a bit of precedent in the industry around allowing people to start and to make at limited or no cost. But then when you really want to fully harness that, leveraging and paying for management tools. And I think one of the things that's cool for Power Platform is when you purchase, Power Automate Premium, yes, you are getting a set of governance and security features. You're also getting, a very, very robust set of connectors to premium data sources, allowing you to modernize legacy applications. You get much richer entitlements to Dataverse, which, as you mentioned earlier, from the data all the way to and through the logic tier, there's just so much power there. And so, I think there's always, I think, a bit of a hesitation when, transaction is required. But to quote someone, software costs money. And so, did I answer your question, Mark?
Yeah, that is good. And that I like the analogy to that former technology for monitoring those environments. The other question I have is, how do you answer folks that are stuck in the basic land, right? And they, managed environments, it seems that managed environments are like, oh, that's paid. And it's like, we put that to one side. Dataverse is paid, right? So what you get in premium. How do you handle, and I'm not talking about SMB space here, I'm talking mid to enterprise, anything from SMC up to enterprise scale. How do you handle the conversation of premium versus basic? It's like there's so much value in basic that it's kind of like, I see people spend so much time just trying to stick within basic boundaries, and that's a cost overhead in its own right. And then, of course, the biggest issue I have with basic is a security vulnerability of the lack of governance and security protocol that's in there by default. How do you handle that conversation with people?
Yeah, so, and maybe one nit, Mark. When we look at how basic works, I wouldn't say that there's a security vulnerability, right? But rather, I think that there are a set of rich security controls that come with the premium offering that aren't there, right?
Yeah.
And then I think beyond that, when we look at how we have these conversations with our customers, we kind of take one of two approaches based on whether or not they are an organization that has a small number of high usage apps or whether they have a large number of lower usage apps. When you have a customer who already has an app that has, thousands of users running on it, have you ever seen the movie The Godfather? Right? It's a very nice
Mm-hmm.
app you have there. It'd be a shame if something happened to it. To be clear,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
like a threatening way or anything like that, but it's like,
Yeah.
wait a second, you have an app with 10,000 users and you're doing your development and production, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the thing is, when customers have those large use cases, those high usage use cases, managed environments
Mm-hmm.
practically sells itself, right? Then
Yeah.
when we look at customers who have that large number of smaller apps where, no app in its own right would drive premium. But if you look across that collection of apps and then you say, hey, wouldn't you like it if you
Yeah.
could be much more proactive around governance and security of those applications? And this is what it translates to in terms of cost savings. This is what it translates to in terms of your ability to make the platform ubiquitously available and much more powerful to your broader organization. Once again, it kind of starts to sell itself. So two different approaches based on whether or not you've got big apps or a lot of little apps. Make sense?
Yeah, it's good. And I definitely wasn't saying there was inherent security vulnerability in basic. I was saying that if you don't, have your ducks in a row, you're managing that yourself. It's not being managed for you. And therefore, there's an implication of that.
Exactly. And one more other thing, Mark, I think the other thing I would say is 99% of what we do in managed environments are things that, given enough time and enough effort, anybody could do themselves, right? The question is, it's a build versus buy discussion.
100%.
There are a few exceptions where, like managed environments put things in the middle of other customer interactions, like environment routing is one of those examples. Of course, you can build your own experience for people to request an environment. In fact, the COE has a request an environment app, right? Other examples that we see customers build automation. They use the admin connectors to automate configuration of environments as their provision. You can do that. It's just we think it's a lot better if we provide it for you out of the box because there's a lot of machinery to build and maintain there.
Yeah, agreed. We're drawing to a close. And my last question is a bit tongue-in-cheek, but I'll let you take it however you want. M365, right, has been incredibly successful in that it bundled a whole bunch of productivity solutions by Microsoft and provided a SKU for it, an E3, E5 type SKU. I feel like we now are at that point with the Power Platform that you get a range of, maker tools that it would be great to have a Power Platform SKU, right? That included your Power Automate, included your Copilot Studio, it included Dataverse, the whole, and it'd be an interesting way to procure. How soon do we get that license?
I wish I knew, Mark. How about that? I think it's a great idea. And I think that one of the things that we do see is, especially as we move more and more into the enterprise high use cases that we were discussing earlier, you don't have, a circle on the left, which is apps, and a circle on the right, which is workflows, right? Increasingly, the applications that people are building leverage combinations of those two. And yes, a workflow invoked in the context of the app is covered by the app license. But I think that there is an opportunity here because one of the things that I think is pretty cool about the Power Platform is when you look across the set of capabilities that we provide from apps, from Automate, Copilot, Pages, so on and so forth, the Dataverse, there's not really any other provider that has such a broad ecosystem with such a broad set of capabilities. And so I think that there is a lot of opportunity for us to make it simpler for folks to acquire and to start using the technologies. But I have no insight into future, packaging or what have you, nor could I share that on the podcast if I did.
Of course. Hence the tongue-in-cheek nature and me getting it on record that I'd have asked before it gets announced. But anyhow, the last question I have, What excites you about AI?
I'll give a little story. As I was ramping up when I joined Power Up Scale team here a little over a year ago, man, there was so much going on. I didn't even know how to spell ME at the time. And the thing is, I was watching some of my coworkers and my colleagues, and man, just like the capacity that they seem to have to go through documents, to go through their emails, to be able to respond to Teams chats quickly. I was kind of blown away. And I asked one of them, like, man, like, what are you doing? Like your bandwidth, your throughput's just insane. And yeah, I use Copilot to help me rewrite our product review doc. I use it to help me, go through and summarize those long email threads with 4,000 replies on them and those sorts of things. And I think it was like a moment where I saw how very tangibly AI could help me on a day-to-day basis. And I know that sounds maybe a little selfish, but a lot of times we talk about and think about these technologies in the abstract sense that is for someone else,
Yeah.
as opposed to how they change our lives on a daily basis. And,
Exactly.
as that change and that transformation occurs, yes, it does mean that I get through, maybe 25% more emails a day or something. I'm making that stat up, by the way. I have no idea.
Yeah.
But it's not just more emails that I get through in a day, but it's also that many more dinners that I make it to sit down with my family. And it's that many more customers that I get to talk to. And so I think seeing how AI is transforming lives of myself, lives of others, I think that's what's really cool. And I think that looking at all the progress that we've been able to make around governing and securing low code and bringing all of those same capabilities to the world of generative AI, I think that's a game changer. And I think that's where the business is going to head here over the coming months.
I like it. Practical AI, how it affects you every day. I think that's so important. Are you going to be at the Power Platform Conference in Vegas this year? Can people see you? Are you doing a session there?
Oh, yeah. We'll be there in force. Most of the team will be there. We have our workshop on, governance and security, the 2024 edition of what we did last year. I mean, it was sold out last year, so I expect it will be again this year. We have a ProDev ALM workshop as well. That one was sold out last year. I expect it will be again this year. And then we have a number of sessions. One, kind of like a mini keynote covering governance and security. And then we have deep dives into security, app scale, admin scale, and AI scale. So, we're going to be there and we're looking forward to it.
See you there.
Awesome. See you then, Mark.
Hey, thanks for listening. I'm your host, Mark Smith, otherwise known as the NZ365 guy. Is there a guest you would like to see on the show from Microsoft? Please message me on LinkedIn and I'll see what I can do. Final question for you. How will you create with Copilot today? Ka kite.